Hi, my name is Dr. Deanne Ross. I'm the love theorist. I'm also a social work educator. And one of the things that social work educators are about is really trying to bring ideas and ways of practicing to students and practitioners that might really help in all sorts of situations with people. And because one of my pet passions in my thinking and writing is about love and the place of love in social work, that's what I want to talk with you about today and give you some really concrete examples, not necessarily easy to do, of how social work can be very loving in the most expansive way and in the most relevant way to people in all sorts of situations. How about you have a think about in your life too, whether these kinds of skills and ways of being are important to you and part of how you are loving to others. I think we'll have a lot of similarities. Okay. So if I had to really say what's the most important thing to me to show love to another person, it would be to know how to be present for them. Now that sounds a bit of a weird way of speaking, but it's about how to put all my concerns and worries and things I have to be doing, really clearing the space, clearing my mind, opening my heart to be truly willing to listen and be with somebody with where they're at and what's important to them. That's not as straightforward as you might think in social work practice, because often we have competing loyalties and obligations. That also might seem a weird thing to say, where often we might think that, I know a lot of students think that what social work is about is being totally available for the person, the client in front of us. And while that is absolutely the most important priority, sometimes it's not that straightforward, because the place we work can really influence how we are with a person. However, within all of that, no matter where we work and whatever the purpose of the interaction with the person, to be present for them is really important. Otherwise, you're not doing them a service, and you may be missing important things that they're telling you that could make a real difference in how you and they work together. Okay, so being present with someone is about being loving towards someone in the professional sense. Okay, the big part of being present with somebody, I think, is knowing how to listen deeply to somebody. And all the helping professions talk about listening as a really important skill. Sometimes we talk about it in terms of empathy, the ability to be with someone, to stand in their shoes, stand alongside someone and imagine how they feel, not presuming to know how they feel, but really working hard, if you have to, working really hard to be as cognizant as you can of what this person is telling you and what it means for them, and what they're also maybe not telling you directly that you can pick up by listening really deeply. So being present comes first, because when you're present, you can listen deeply. Then empathy is more likely to happen. And empathy can't only be something you feel on the inside, where you might feel a real concern for someone, feel a sense of understanding. It needs to be communicated back to the person that you're feeling empathy for them. And this is the other side of being present and listening. And that's the ability to respond, which is also pretty complicated, because, human beings are complicated, aren't we? So the ability to respond by showing empathy is very important, so the other person knows that you're actually present, that you are listening and you are hearing them accurately and to the right level of depth and concern and seriousness in what they're expressing. The ability to say back to them, look, what I'm picking up is that you're really, really frightened about the situation you're in. And in fact, at times you have feared for your life and the life of your children. This might be someone who's experiencing domestic violence might be saying to you. And to just say back, oh, so you're a bit worried about things at home, is not evidence of listening deeply, and is really missing the mark of how serious the situation is. So being present, knowing how to listen deeply, knowing how to reflect back, show the person that you're hearing them accurately and deeply is really important. And the better that we are at doing that, the more likely the person is to trust you and to also tell you all of what's important to them and not hold back because they're worried you're not going to be able to handle what they're telling you. Okay, so this is about how we show love, from my point of view, in the work we do with people in our day-to-day work life. The other part of being present for somebody is the ability to be really able to, like, it's really hard to describe. What I'm wanting to say is to be able to be in the space with someone and to actually be feeling what they're communicating and the depth of their pain and trauma or grief and loss or whatever it is that they're communicating, and not shy away from it. Because that example I just gave you of empathy, if I was reflecting back to someone in a domestic violence situation, oh, so you're a bit worried about what's happening at home, that just does not show the seriousness, the possible life threat that might be happening. It doesn't show your ability to really go into the pain and distress of the person and understand and communicate that accurately. So that ability to really be with someone in their pain and in their story without taking over, without telling your story or your experiences, but actually being able to feel the pain and not be overwhelmed by it, and not shy away from what the depth of that might be for the person and the complexity of what that might be for the person is really important. And people can pick it up. They can pick it up if you are shying away from the depth of what they're trying to say. And that, to me, is falling short of being loving and truly present and being of service to somebody when you do that. Understandable if it happens, but please, if that's happening, you really need to get support to know how to be with someone in that depth of their pain. Okay, so see how those points are all kind of interrelated, and they are the keystone to whether you can build rapport, build trust, and build a sense of caring regard with somebody. All those things are part of being loving from my point of view. Now, often we're working with people, and this is another key part of what I think is crucial, but also very hard to do, is the ability to hold hope for somebody. People often, when seeking social work support or being required to see a social worker, have lost hope in their situation, have lost hope in themselves, and have good reason for that usually too. It's not just something that, is a thought that passes by and isn't really that relevant or attached to anything. When someone is showing hopelessness and devastation of experiences, this is truly shocking for them, and it's very hard to move and do anything to help themselves when a person is feeling that level of hopelessness. So being loving in social work is very much about showing hope and faith in the person when they can no longer feel it for themselves. And now that might be incredibly challenging for you, but not as challenging it is for that person. And this comes back to your faith in people, faith in circumstances, and faith in your relationship with the person being able to make at least a little difference in that moment. Okay, so that's ability to hold hope, to show hope and faith in the person is central to loving practice in social work. Okay, now I want to now come to another kind of collection of skills which are really pretty sophisticated and at the heart of social work. If I had to say what is the second most important value and capacity in social work alongside love, I would say social justice is a really important concept and value, and the ability to understand unjust situations and know how to work toward justice and fair treatment with people is also about loving practice. Because if you didn't love people, if you didn't care about people, you wouldn't be caring about any injustice that's happening to them. So when injustice is happening, we need to be able to stand with somebody and not shy away from how hard that is, not walk away from a person in their hour of need. So this could be someone who is a victim of crime, someone who is going through the court system and is feeling very unsupported and not believed, and knowing how to be with the person and support every step they take, and advise as appropriate and get legal advice as appropriate as you're standing with the person who might be a victim of crime. For example, someone who's experienced domestic violence. So that ability to recognise what's unfair and the harm and distress that often always causes. I think unfair treatment always causes harm and distress. And what I call brokenheartedness is cornerstone social work practice. And as part of that, understanding the influence of discrimination and stigma against people who are not valued in our society, and talking with the person as it's appropriate about how they experience being discriminated against, what that does to them, and what you can do to support the person to really be more resilient if that is part of the issue against the stigma that is happening. And alongside that, looking for ways to respond to the unfair treatment the person is receiving. So, for example, and just to take the domestic violence example a little bit further, often we hear comments on social media and other places, well, she went back to him, so she deserves what she gets. That is very stigmatising, very uninformed ways of talking about life-threatening, very distressing situations. And that is part of discriminating against women who are experiencing violence in Australia and around the world, with extremely devastating and often life-threatening impacts for the women, some men who experience domestic violence, and their children, and often pets and animals in the household. That kind of discrimination has a very depleting effect on people. I had contact, for example, with a person who was working with me in the mental health system from a lived experience perspective, and she also had come from a domestic violence situation. It was part of what deeply affected her mental health. But here she was working in the mental health system to educate professionals on how to be attuned to the effects of discrimination with people when they're working in the mental health field. And she had lots of cuts on her arms, and what would happen, she said, often people in the workplace would shy away from her, would look at her in a really unfriendly way when they had noticed the cuts on her arm. And she said all the years of struggle she had previously in mental health systems were hardly comparable to the discrimination she felt in the workplace. So knowing what harm can happen when harmful judgments, including your own, are directed toward the people you're working with, knowing how to help a person unpack and talk about that and not blame themselves about that, and then what can be done to support someone, is really important part of loving practice and bringing more justice to a person in their lives. And just as one last comment, I'd like to say that often when we're working with people in a social work setting, they've lost a lot of self-respect and dignity, and have often been subject to coercion and bad treatment, not only within families and communities, but in helping services as well. And anything that we can do to help a person uphold their dignity is really crucial, because that is one of the first warning signs that a person is being dehumanised when they lose their dignity. So in the mental health space, doing everything I can, it's just one small example, that people have their own clothes and their own personal belongings so that they feel they can dress and wear things that are theirs, and be recognised as a person who knows what their preferences and needs are. It isn't just ignorant of how they look and what people think of them, is an example of helping to uphold the dignity of a person. Okay, so what we've been talking about is what I think makes social workers great lovers in professional practice, and these are examples too that can make a difference in our everyday lives with people. Hope you found it helpful, and look forward to your comments. Thanks so much. Bye for now.